quick little run through of things here. So this chapter, which is chapter 5, just talks about in more detail the divergent thinking, convergent thinking, which was brought up before. So we're spreading our ideas, nothing's wrong, and then we converge on things in an affirmative way. So defer judgment, go for quantity, make connections, seek novelty are all divergent principles. So especially the quantity, but they're all kind of related. We're making connections to hopefully get more quantity. And maybe most importantly, we're deferring judgment. So we're not saying, oh, that's dumb and that's not going to work. And people will immediately start to do that if you start to do one of these idea things. You say something and the first person, the other person says, oh, I don't think that'll work, but maybe if we did it my way, it would work, right? Something along those lines. If they're saying, that won't work, or let's do this, they are implicitly judging what you said, right? Even if they're what they're doing is they're potentially jumping to the affirmative judging part, affirmatively converging, rather than just letting that idea be its own and then working from there. All right, so convergent principles. Now we've got this affirmative judgment business. We're going to keep creative, check your objectives, stay focused. So as we're taking these multiple ideas and trying to come to a bit of a conclusion, or at least narrowing the list, that's what we want to do. All right, so here, that was where we left off at the end of Friday. So now, the author calls this the wild card principle. Incubation. What does incubation mean? Incubation, you can think of in the animal world if you want, or whatever comes to mind.
Eggs have to be like incubated for a certain amount.
Okay. So what's happening to the egg as it's incubating? What's happening in there? Huh? It's developing, yes. It's growing still. That's why we're calling it kind of incubation, is that it's not like it's just static, but we're waiting a little bit. So how many times have you guys waited overnight to make a decision or something? Let me sleep on it. You know, the old let me sleep on it. That can be a really effective way to help you kind of sort through the details, especially with complex things. Things might hit you a little bit differently, maybe after you've gotten away from the stress of trying to come up with ideas and other things. Sometimes your timeline doesn't allow incubation. Like, we need a decision today, this afternoon by 4 p.m. We've got to report to the boss. So you might not have the luxury of waiting overnight or whatever. So that's kind of why he calls it a wild card principle. All right. So here's your homework for this chapter. It's kind of a two-part thing. It's not due till Thursday because it does involve a few different days. So we're thinking between now and then. This is one I think I told you was forthcoming. It's another reflective type of deal. So over the course of the next several days, not a week, it's due Thursday, keep a journal and record of observations of how you and other people have responded to ideas. Commit yourself to practicing affirmative judgment. So when you're trying to come up with an idea, you're going to look for the positives rather than the negatives. So that's kind of your own internal reflection on this. Commit to practicing affirmative judgment in response to new ideas that get presented to you. Describe how you and others have judged ideas. So you might have a particular thing that happened on your athletic team, or mom and dad, whatever it is. You'll come across something, I promise. We do this almost daily, right? If you think about coming across with ideas and activities. And then finally, write a summary of your comments to cover all items 1 through. So 1 and 2 are kind of the journaling part. And then what have been your consequences associated with your affirmative responses? How easy or difficult was it to stay positive? So here, just try to see if people respond to you differently by taking this affirmative angle. See how they do, see if maybe it encouraged them to further their idea as well, since you didn't automatically throw their idea in the garbage. So whatever it is, however that gets you, again, this isn't meant to be super difficult, but just reflective, right? So that you guys are being aware of some of these principles. And so this isn't a big paper or anything. It's not meant to be super difficult. Follow this stuff. I might just be a page write-up or something, and do the activity. Okay, questions or comments there? All right, that's due Thursday, and that is chapter 5. So today, let's see. Chapter 6 is the last chapter that we'll have covered for the midterm. So it is on our first middle part of the thinking wheel here, assessing the situation. So assessing the situation was you're confronted with a problem or an idea, and the first thing you should do is try to gather some data. So what is data? You can give me some examples, you can, whatever comes to mind when you think data, right? Relevant information, okay, so information to the thing, all right, what else comes to mind? Maybe narrow it down from relevant information, let's kind of narrow it down a little further. Put out?
Measurable information.
Okay, measurable information. So when you think data, it's more quantifiable in some sense. That could be, okay?
I was gonna say like numbers that show facts from a certain.
Okay, so something measurable, right, in the sense of that. So that would certainly be it. What else could be considered data, or as Bryce said, information relevant to whatever the deal is? Cameron?
Observation.
Okay, observations. So just kind of what you saw, right? Is that what you mean by observations? Okay. Other things? What else besides what you saw?
Well,
What you smell, yeah. I mean, it could be anything. That's all I wanted to push for kind of one more thing here. So we're using data. I think, especially my brain would think like maybe some of you guys are thinking with numbers and quantity, and right, that's data, like a computer data, but it can be really anything from the 5 senses. So descriptions, even smells, hunches, guesses, emotions, I mean, everything. We want to kind of get our arms around everything when we're assessing the situation in terms of gathering facts. Give me a situation that's either relevant to you, Ottawa, the city of Ottawa, OU, the state, the country, the world. I don't care. Throw me something. Throw something at me. Anything of a problem that the world faces, or that Ottawa University faces, or that whatever.
Well, Auburn University has a question earlier about 750 students and the amount of parking spots.
Okay.
I don't know, not near as many students.
Okay.
So students are having to park.
Okay. So basically, it sounds like the problem is a parking shortage, right? All right. So parking shortage. All right. So we run into a problem, and we're going to start by assessing the situation by trying to dive into what's all the data revolving around the parking. Now, parking, that's kind of a good one. I mean, some of the things we can think of right now is we've got on and off campus living. We've got buildings that are kind of scattered around. We've got parking at the baseball field, right, and the tennis courts. So we can start to think that, parking is not just kind of a easy thing, like we got one parking lot and plenty of space to add more. And then you've got the users of the parking, not only students, right? Faculty, staff, visitors, so the users of the parking. So all of a sudden you start thinking about parking, and it's not quite an easy thing like, oh, just do this. Parking problem solved, right? So it's got a level of complexity that I think would be enough to think about this. All right, so we're going to be using that diagnostic thinking. So give that a read. Metacognition. Probably a word you guys don't use every day. So I'm curious, what's that? No Googling, of course, remember, just metacognition. Let's start with cognition before we hit meta. Anybody want to take a stab at cognition? Gavin? Okay, kind of thinking, yeah. Anybody else want to add? Carson?
Your ability to process something.
Okay, process something. So recognizing something, right? We got the recognizing, so we got recognition, processing. Anybody else want to add? So what about meta? You've maybe used that word a little bit before, but what would be a meta? What would be meta? I'm even giving you a hand signal that might kind of give you an idea. Jake?
Something bigger than metaphor, so like metaphor is something like out of.
Okay, outside of something, Bryce? Okay, could be part of maybe the surroundings or something. Sometimes you might have heard like the meta narrative. Have you heard that word at all? It's kind of a weird, somewhat academic thing. So a meta. So you got a narrative. What's a narrative? A story, just a story. So you've got a story within a movie, but maybe there's a meta narrative. Like what would that be like? There's maybe stories that are linked together, but what's the meta narrative? It could be a connection of everything, kind of the overall thing of what we're trying to explain. You know, like I guess the Bible might be a connection, and even other books like that. But you've got a number of different stories in the Bible, right? So there's different stories, but there's this kind of this link of creation to restoration. If you want to go all the way to the Revelation at the end of the Bible versus Genesis the beginning. So the meta-narrative is kind of all of those books tied together. It's kind of the big story. But within that, then there's all these little stories in between. So that's one example of kind of the word meta. Yeah. Could be a theme, yeah. Or related to a theme, sure. Yep. All right, so metacognition. Give that a read. All right, so thinking about your thinking, right? Thinking about your thinking. So metacognition is kind of your ability to think about your little thinking that goes on in between. What are the things that motivate you? Maybe it's the emotional circumstances. I went on a fishing trip. I don't know if this is a great example, but I'll throw Tyler under the bus a little bit. But my fishing buddy got mad at his dad because he lost a big fish, and we were on the river, and then he takes his rod and actually breaks the fishing rod over the side of the boat. And I'm like, okay, he's on tilt, Then maybe he's not having as good ability to monitor his thinking when you have that emotion going, and maybe he's got to go to counseling. I don't get that bad that I have to break my. I guess I talked to you, Cameron, about throwing your golf clubs too, right? At one point, So everybody kind of handles that stuff a little bit differently. And so metacognition is your ability to kind of think about your thinking. And that way you can stay more focused to kind of come up with some solutions to problems. So the metacognitive tool, what would that mean to you? We just talked about metacognition. Now we got a metacognitive tool. What would be a tool, a metacognitive tool? Or take a stab at it, Cameron?
Just the thinking tool.
Can you give me an example, or if it comes to mind? You're right, by the way. I think a thinking tool. Anybody have anything come to mind? Some sort of way, a tool. Like we think about a tool, in some ways this marker is a tool, right? It helps me communicate. So we can think about this being a tool or a physical tool. But here, this one's kind of a mental tool. Sean, did you want to say something? Okay, how you think it's going to help you on that? That's what you're going to say? Okay, so the tool part, though, I don't think it's helping you how to think, right? Or to think through things, if we're going to use the how word. So Give that a read. So CPS, by the way, we're kind of using the shorthand notation. Remember, that's our creative, that's our book, basically. The creative process here of thinking our way through things. I mentioned the Dean search tool. So we use kind of a tool, a thinking tool, and maybe you guys have used something similar to this when we were looking for a new boss for the business school. And so, you know, what would you think a person, what are some attributes of potential applicants to help run the school of business that you think would be important? Just throw out a few to me. Of a person who's going to lead the business school, kind of be the head of the business school, my new boss, by the way, or whatever, because we are going to have to do this. Jalen?
Good business resume.
Okay, good business ready. So business, basically business experience. All right, what else? Yeah, Bryce?
Hardworking.
What's that?
Hardworking.
Hardworking, so kind of work ethic or something. What else might be important, especially in a university?
Like a teaching background.
Okay, teaching, yeah. So we got some teaching background. Yeah, Jalen?
Leadership skills.
Okay, leadership skills. All right, so you can imagine that we have some areas, the degree might be important for different reasons. Do they have a doctorate degree? Do they have a master's degree? You know, whatever. So this is called kind of the tool that we used was kind of putting candidates into this kind of row here of, you know, John, Susie, Betty are all applicants. And then maybe it's a scoring system of, you know, 1 to 10 for each one. And so this person's 9, an 8, a 6. However, this is measured 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 6, 7, 8, and then we get a total score of, I'm just making up these numbers, I don't know if this really adds up, but it's a 54 for John, Susie's a 58, and Betty's a 37. All right. Now, is this a perfect way for sure we hire Susie because Susie's a 58? No, I mean, can we perfectly quantify this stuff? No. But yet, nonetheless, it's kind of helping us remember because, you know, John was a really solid guy and he left a good impression. He was a real talker. And so, you know, you're kind of like, oh, but let's stay focused on all of our objectives. Yes, John was an excellent communicator, but the most I can give him on communication, which I don't even have on here, is, you know, I already gave him a 9 here. Maybe John was a 10 or something. But really, that was enough of one that really should get extra weight or something, right? But we just use the 0 to 10 scale, you know. See what I'm trying to say? So it helps you kind of think through the things that are important for the decision, but might not be the only thing you use. So it just kind of helps direct your thinking. Okay, questions or comments there? Do you guys use stuff like this? I mean, now that I gave that example, you probably use something along those lines. Maybe it was a different type of rubric or evaluation or something. Yeah, right?
I say we use it for Petco, like they have like different people where they have it pretty like their target marketed. We'll go through like 25 points.
Ah, good idea, yeah. So they might have learned that people greater than the age of 40 or something are more likely to buy a Petco knife than others, right? So you could do some sort of scorecard for them to try to target who you make calls to or emails to, right? Yeah, good. Good example. All right, anybody else? All right. So here's the reasons why we want to be skilled at assessing the situation. So here's our model again, kind of the CPS model. We start in the middle, we're gathering data, assessing the situation. That's what we're spending all of chapter 6 on. And let's kind of round robin this. Let's start with Ashan and go to Rayleigh, Carson. So read each bullet point, starting with Ashan.
The leaders are positioned to influence and to be influenced. They need an accurate understanding of that and that they can see.
Okay, good. Rayleigh? All right, next, Carson.
Leaders need to continuously monitor situations to make adjustments and respond appropriately to evolving circumstances and change.
Okay, Pernell?
Leaders are gatekeepers of the flow of information. They must recognize what information needs to be shared with what people want at any given time.
Okay, so there we go. There we go. What does can be influenced? So we talked about the law of influence, but it says leaders are in a position to influence and to be influenced. How so? What do you mean by that? What is that? What is the author getting at?
How I look at it is how like a leader, just because your leader doesn't mean you're at the very top, you know, like that leader became a leader because he looked at someone above him.
Okay.
I look at it.
So, but I want to think about this to be influenced part. Carson?
Like to be able to adapt to other people's ideas.
All right. So yeah, that would be one way to be influenced. So why, this is reasons why the leader needs to be skilled at gathering data, assessing the situation, getting all that, because leaders are in the position to influence, but also to be influenced. So what might the leader run into problems if they don't rely on all types of information, but just rely on their executive assistant? What could potentially happen if they really just rely on their executive assistant? They've just kind of gotten lazy over time, you know, they're making a lot of money, and they're like, okay, whatever John says on my executive assistant, that's what we're going to do. Carson?
He kind of like loses his drive.
Okay, loses drive, potentially. Whose interest might executive assistant John have at heart compared to the leaders? His, right? So I think what that one really says is you got to watch out. Will people potentially try to deceive you knowing that you're the leader? Yeah, maybe not necessarily even people in your organization, but let's say a Cutco salesman comes to the door and knows that you're the leader. Could they potentially try to make a great sales pitch? That's not lying, by the way, but it might be a great sales pitch because they want to sell knives and they know you're the leader, right? Are you in a position to be influenced? Yeah, right, because you can make a call. Now, is it the right thing that we should do the knives? Well, you better know a bunch of other information, not just what the salesperson told you about the knives, right? So all of this other stuff. So why do leaders need to be skilled at assessing the information? Because they can be influenced and possibly to a negative, in a negative way. All right, what's this gatekeepers? Leaders are gatekeepers of the flow of information. What is meant by that? Cameron?
Is it like they can restrict the information that work will get?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of the gatekeeper idea. Can you give me any examples where, you know, that would come to mind where they're restricting the flow of information, possibly? Yeah.
Restaurant,
Okay, how so?
with the line manager, he knows how much we make, every night, what we eat, stuff that, how long.
Okay, so yeah, might not want to give out that. All right. And what would be the purpose of not revealing that?
I honestly don't know. Because I'm like, well, what does it matter? Like, what we made for the night, but it's not really.
You know, could it be for maybe to diminish people stealing or something? You know, like how much money is in the cash register normally at the end of the night or something like that? That might be a little bit extreme. Yeah, they're not allowed to disclose that, right? So possibly, you know, that's part of the thing is there might be information that we want to go out. What was the thing that was just here recently? I guess that might be from a fiction book I'm reading, but I was thinking about our little bomb incident on Sunday. You know, President Reg, what do we reveal? What do we not reveal, right? So are we just kind of wide open? You know, how big was this bomb? And somebody told me it's the size of a finger. I don't know. Have you guys heard anything more? Yeah, so pipe bomb, I'm thinking like PVC, like this big, but somebody told me, I don't know if it was credible or not, that it was more like this big. So kind of the size of like a M80 or something is what I have in my mind. And then I'm back to thinking, well, that might be fun to make as a kid. You know, I played with some fairly quarter stick of dynamite is what an M80 is. And so maybe it was a kid that dropped it and we're not like actually under attack, right? So, but President Reg, being in his position, was the gatekeeper potentially, ultimately, of that information. Like, what did we disclose? When do we disclose it? Like, as soon as he finds it out, does he get a text message and start tweeting it, or would that be it, right? So he's the gatekeeper of that type of information, and so that information might have an appropriate time, place, and it might not be right in the moment. It might be something that we need to wait until official word came back from an investigation, that sort of thing, right? Okay, questions or comments on that? All right, next in line, Jalen.
The one under the gatekeeper.
Yep.
All right. Leaders are constantly
Inundated.
inundated.
Let's pause there since you did. Inundated, what does that mean? Leaders are constantly inundated.
I would say faced with.
Faced with getting lots of information, right? So it's like a continuous flow, constantly inundated, like it keeps coming in. Information's coming in all the time. Okay, continue on.
Inundated with information, some of which is important and some of which is not. Skill in assessing the situation helps leaders sort through information and find the salient points quickly.
All right, all these big words here. Salient, what's meant by that one? Salient points. Important, relevant, right? So something that's close to it. So you've got lots of information coming in. Some of it's garbage, like information that you don't really need to know. It's just kind of noise. And so it's saying leaders need to be skilled in assessing the situation, be able to sort through that information, whether it's relevant, whether it's not. Okay, Bryce?
A leader's job is not just to make decisions, but to make good or wise decisions. Thus, they need to actively seek out data and base their decisions on a full range of information.
Okay, good. We'll just continue on here, Jake.
Leaders need a widen it to capture data so that opportunities are on.
All right. Okay, so we stay focused on what these bullets are. These are all reasons why leaders need to be skilled at assessing the situation. What this chapter's on. All right, next reader. All right, and lastly,
to guide and advise others, even must be
cognizant, like the recognition thing that we were talking about before.
of what is happening in the process as well, having content and be able to help others locate themselves in the process.
Okay, this one's kind of interesting here on the content as well as the process, right? So there's actually the actual raw information, if you will, but it might also be relevant, like how was that information gathered? How was it dispersed, right? So the process of the information gathering might be important as well. All right, so finally, here is our toolbox. So we do have a couple tools, thinking tools, that we're going to highlight in this chapter. Actually, more than just this one even too, but this is on kind of thinking through assessing the situation. 5 W's and an H. Who, what, when, where, why, and how, and that's the H, right? So 5 W's and H. So we're going to just call this tool the 5 W's and an H. And so they're going to be gathered on the particular thing. So for our parking example here, so the parking shortage, you can imagine starting to do who, what, when, where, why, and how for the parking shortage, right? And this is just kind of, you know, what, who. So would that be students? Who else? Faculty, staff, kind of like just kind of forcing yourself to go through. We're not going to do the whole exercise. We'll do something like that probably tomorrow, where we work through it. But that's our thinking tool. And so what you want to do is ask those questions, and then you can kind of keep going. If we're doing divergent guidelines, what are we doing? What's the divergent principles that you should have memorized for the midterm? Divergent principles. I didn't actually hear what you said. You said the laws. Okay, yeah, no, not the laws. Divergent principles. Defer judgment. Bingo. There's 3 other. Keep novelty alive, maybe something like that.
Openness.
Openness to novelty. Well, that's okay. We're gonna double check ourselves here in a little bit, but there's one that you're missing that's kind of important. Defer judgment was number 1. Rayleigh got that. Not that they have to be in order, by the way, but
Make connections.
make connections. What was the other one? I still haven't heard it, I don't think, unless you guys said it and I didn't hear you. I'll give you a hint. Q. Quantity. What about it? Go for quantity. Right? Go for quantity. So lots of ideas. All right, so that's what we're going to do with using those divergent principles. And then last one here, again, I just want to introduce these to you. Why is the sky blue? Why is there snow cold? Why is it yellow? So this is actually a thinking tool called the why diagram. So identify a situation that requires creative thinking. Parking shortage. Pose the question, why, in regard to the situation. Why is this a problem? Let's just start off with that. Parking shortage. This was Jake's idea here. Why is it a problem? Not enough places to park on campus.
Yeah.
Why?
Not enough room.
Not enough room. Why?
Because there's a lot of buildings, all in a small area.
Okay, we might have a couple things like a lot of buildings. Why else? More students. Okay, so enrollment's been growing maybe. Why else? Okay, so now under the more students, why? Why is there more students?
Because adding more sports.
Adding more sports. Adding more. Why? Why are we adding more sport, right? So we keep doing what the why does is it's a way to kind of drill your thinking down into exploring lots of possibilities. And Bryce?
My question is, how is exploring like a possibility of like why are there more students a good thing, fix a parking situation?
Well, it might be part of that, and then we might say, well, why is that a problem? We might phrase it a little bit differently, and it's like, well, they're paying tuition. Why aren't we paying for a parking lot to make new ground for it if it's important, right? And if it's important to stop getting more students, like no more students are going to come here if you can't park here, well, then all of a sudden administration might be carving out a little parking budget, right? So we might kind of, as we think through, instead of just stopping with, there's not enough parking spots on campus, that's the problem. This is bullshit, this parking, let's riot. We can actually start to kind of uncover, deeper things that might come up with a creative solution. And maybe it'd be a creative way to petition to the university or something. All right. We'll pick up there tomorrow.